we are um, reacting from to the 2020 SONA Duterte's fifth SONA, and this is the view from Cebu for so the local perspective of the issues that Duterte touched on or he did not touch on yesterday. And joining us today are Attorney Liza Osorio from the Philippine Earth Justice Center in Cebu and Professor of Law at the University of Cebu. Thank you for joining us. King Anthony Perez of the National Union of People's Lawyers, Cebu chapter, Hannah Cartagena, Youth Against Tyranny, Cebu, and Nino Olivar, University of San Carlos Political Science Department faculty. Again, thank you all for joining us. And to get started, I wanted to get your thoughts on Duterte's SONA last night. It was only about an hour and 20 minutes, and he touched on various topics. So I want to know if he addressed the issues that are important to you enough, or did not address them sufficiently in his speech last night. So let's start with Attorney Liza.
Yeah, from the sauna yesterday, he didn't even say much about the environment from the perspective of an environmental
Right.
advocate. And what he mentioned were just two things: the National Land Use Act, as well as Boracay. But these are issues, or these are topics that he has already pushed for, especially the National Land Use Act in the past two sonas, I guess. And the National Land Use Act is actually um, quite relevant, especially here in Cebu, since we're talking about illegal conversions of land
Mm,
to different uses like subdivisions, agricultural lands being converted, and not having comprehensive land use plans for local government units. Our development has been really not at all that planned, and so I think
mm,
this is one of the bigger issues that we are facing here in Cebu. But what I would have wanted to hear from him was more on the environment, like
mm,
especially in the time of COVID, right? Here in Cebu, we have faced one of the greatest challenges, which is on the decreasing number of deaths, and the plans of our government, especially the local government, in addressing this. One
mm,
such issue is the conversion or development of a protected area in Barangay Guba in Cebu City, where
mm,
389 trees were cut, and this was
mm,
actually spearheaded by the local government unit, and we're calling on the accountability because of the local officials or local government who were responsible for this, because we cannot just ignore the need to protect the environment in this time of crisis, because the environment, it will actually protect us and adds to our resilience to future pandemics or even the pandemic right now. So if we keep on ignoring the fact that we need to protect
mm,
these areas from development, from illegal conversions, from cutting of trees, then that will actually spell so much doom for our communities who are here living in Cebu. So that's just one of the things that I found lacking in the sauna
mm.
yesterday.
Okay, I want to get back to some of those points later, but
Mm.
first, let's go on to Nino Olivar from the University of San Carlos. Can you share your thoughts about what you thought of the SONA and what you wanted to hear?
But for um, the rest of the previous presidents, and most especially, it's quite short for a situation that we are in right now, uh, which is basically in the midst of a crisis, multifaceted crisis that is, which means that we are facing different uh, issues brought about by the pandemic, no? And most especially the socio-economic impacts of this crisis to the majority of the Filipino people. And I think eh, or Duterte Sona could have addressed primarily this particular political and social situation and health situation that we have right now, which we didn't quite
Mm.
hear substantial figures or data or plans from the administration, except for a few
Mm.
a few points like the what they call this they're asking for China, or they're waiting for China uh, to 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 lend the vaccine for the
Mm.
Philippines to use. No? And I think this is one, but perhaps the currently most important thing that should be highlighted in the SONA. There are many other things that were not mentioned, economic aspect, although
Mm.
again, just basically just put up the build program, and then the other one, the plant program he's planning to do.
Mm.
All these are just big pictures with no substantial as for a report or presidential report. I think this is some would say even that there's nothing much to critique because there's nothing much in the SONA. Uh, uh, so I think that's the negative side of the SONA. I was There were moments when uh, Duterte's speech or parts of his speech caught my attention,
Mm.
especially when the parts when he was reading parts of the speech that was somehow uh, substantive, such as standing for national sovereignty, and then he kind of reverted to his position, which is basically there's nothing I can do. And so there's the SONA in itself, the entire speech Duterte gave was full of dissonance as well.
Mm.
So yeah.
Okay. Next, I'd like to move on to Hannah, who is from Youth Against Tyranny, so representing, I guess, the youth sector here in Cebu. Could you share your thoughts on the SONA with us?
Sa tinuoray lang, kay walay kwenta iyang SONA gahapon, kay mura ra siya normal segment sa iyang late night shows but in a different time slot.
Mm.
Kay wala
Mm.
sa kato nga SONA gahapon, wala jud siya roadmap sa kung unsa ang mahitabo sa pandemic or unsay mahitabo for the next 2 years. Sige ra siya mumble on vaccine is just around the corner. And he kept on being personal, especially kasi siya mention og about Bongo, Drilon. It was like his echo chamber lang gahapon. It's just like his normal lang jud nga late night shows. Dili siya SONA. Wala siya tarong
Mm.
nga roadmap on everything. So, though ni-mention siya about sa education, na-mention siya sa athletes o sa uban nga youth sectors. However, dili gihapon siya inclusive kay nakita nato og hapon nga gitagaan niyag tahas ang mga militaries
Mm.
sa iyang mga plano sa education. So makita nato nga militaristic gihapon kaayo ang iyang regime sa
Mm.
pag-atubang ani nga pandemya, pag-atubang sa problema sa edukasyon o pag-atubang sa problema sa ekonomiya. Dayon wala sad kaayo mi nadunggan jud about sa sector sa youth kay wala siya worth mentioning to wala jud mi kuan sa education, yes, but dili siya inclusive. So
Mm.
murag
Mm.
ako lang kulang jud kaayo iyang elaboration in terms of education kay iya ra gipasa gyapon. Wala mi sakto nga plans, wala mi kabalo kung makabalik pa mig eskwela.
Mm. Mm.
So moto kuwang pa jud iyang SONA gahapon.
Okay. And King Perez?
Okay. So as to Duterte SONA yesterday, as to the COVID-19 issue, I think there is no clear pandemic roadmap. Most people were actually anticipating about it, but there was just a few mention about COVID-19, mostly dealing with the economy and commerce, no? And
Mm.
the assurance that he made he assured that there would be a China-made vaccine seems to be insufficient, no, to move forward in the coming months or even years, no.
Mm.
Hopefully not. I would like to divide my comment no into three matters. First, as to the human rights perspective.
Okay.
Second, as to the child rights advocacy, because I'm part of Children's Legal Bureau. And third, as to the LGBTQIA plus rights. No, so I think
Okay.
Duterte mentioned that he will not dodge the obligations to fight for human rights. But I think while peace and order no, are paramount in maintaining a good society, I believe that upholding the rule of law and respecting the basic fundamental rights shall be in place. And even if he made that assurance, it seems that it is contrary to what is happening no, in our society, not just in Cebu, but in the entire Philippines. No? What we see on the news almost on a daily basis is contrary to his message yesterday. We've seen how brazen
Mm.
law enforcement officers in repressing one's right to exercise valued freedoms, like what happened to the Cebu 8 and the enforced disappearance of Elena Tejamo, no, farmers' rights advocate from
Mm.
Fardec. And there was also a mention no on reviving lethal injection no for cases under the comprehensive dangerous drugs act. And
Mm.
we yesterday we issued already a statement from the NUPL Cebu no that we oppose such move or any move to revive that penalty, because for us it is unspeakably regressive no, bearing in mind that there was already a passage of the law that abolishes death penalty in 2006. As to the children's rights, no, he was lauded for saying that there was a creation of the National Council Against Child Labor that would address child
Mm.
labor issues. I believe that that is a welcome development, no, as a child rights advocate. But I think there are a lot of challenges that children are facing, no, especially amid this pandemic. For example, with the pandemic, more children have become more vulnerable from being subjected to
Mm.
abuse and exploitation, no, as shown in the records from the government agencies and NGOs. And there are several pending bills that would further protect these children, like the Anti-Rape Law Amendment, the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Amendment, and other new bills, or those that were mentioned by some legislators, like the Online Sexual Exploitation of Children bill. And there was no
Mm.
assurance that children in conflict with the law would be protected under this administration. For example, there were moves to actually lower the minimum age of criminal responsibility. So it was not also mentioned. No? So I was expecting more when he was saying that, he actually valued the rights of children and rights against discrimination during his SONA. Lastly,
Yeah.
as to the LGBT issue, no,
Yeah.
I'm part of the LGBTQI plus sector, no. He mentioned that there was an executive order, no, that would promote diversity and inclusion in the national program of the government. But I think it's insufficient. There are also pending bills which he could have, certified as urgent. I believe in the national conversation, the LGBTQIA plus issue is always missing, no? So I hope he would step forward in the remaining years. Like, there are a lot of pieces of legislation that could be enacted. For example, the anti-discrimination bill, the SOGI bill, proposals to enact laws on same-sex marriage or civil partnerships or even legal gender recognition. No, so those are the some of the things no that I would wanted to hear from him. But as what Nino said, no, it seems that the SONA was too short that you could not even criticize much because it seems that he got nothing to say more about his accomplishments for the preceding year.
Mm-mm. Okay, thank you, King. So there's a lot to take in there, but I wanted to start off by before we get into the pandemic to address, we're all from Cebu here, and in 2016, Duterte actually won very big. He won the votes here in Cebu about 1.6 million, and he's been performing very well in the surveys, SWS and Post Asia, on average, about 80% and higher, which is approval rating most presidents can only dream of. And Cebu has also been known to be very pro Duterte. Even the progressive progressive sectors in the beginning really supported the administration, at least in the first year, until things started to turn around with the peace talks in 2017. So I wanted to ask Nino, from a political perspective, do you think that Cebu, can you still call Cebu Duterte country, and how do you see his popularity and here in Cebu in 2020, and how is it different from 2016?
From there's something we call a patron client a framework in analyze it's a dominant framework in analyzing Philippine politics, no? So if we are going to use the patron client na framework, this means that political relationships operate within the realm of a
Mm-hmm.
certain patron, those who can give rewards, and the clienteles who receive benefits out of their patron. So, but this particular framework operates on many levels. It could be between voters and elected officials, or higher elected officials and lower elected officials, and even also appointed, most especially appointed officials. Now, a particular characteristic of this particular framework that can be observed, or is always observed, perhaps in every elections, is the phenomena we call political butterflies, or not really a phenomena, but the people, or the politicians we call political butterflies. These are the politicians who tend to transfer to whichever dominant party there is, or whichever party won majority,
Mm.
or whose party won the presidency. And this is because the presidency has one of the most influential powers, even including the power to influence Congress. And you see in Congress right now, formerly dominated by Liberal Party politicians, the same people, the same names who
Mm.
won in the Aquino administration, won the seat in the present Congress. Uh, it's just that they left the Liberal Party and transferred to the PDP, the present political party, as endorsed by President Duterte. In that context, in Cebu alone, many of our locally elected politicians, legislators, some of them are in Congress, in the LGUs as well, uh, are of the same characteristic.
Mm.
So in the previous administration, they were supportive of the administration of Aquino. Then when
Mm.
Duterte won, they were just basically, transferred. They just transferred to the existing political party. That is to follow the patron client framework. It means that they are just being clienteles of Duterte, no? And
Mm-hmm.
if if we are looking at the bureaucracy alone, then we can say perhaps that the dominant political party, the dominant uh, uh, political allegiance in Cebu province and even in Cebu city belongs to Duterte, because somehow he is in power. No, it means that there are no substantial political opposition yet
Mm-hmm.
that is present or can be observed, no, that is participating in the political process or electoral process.
Mm-mm.
Uh, so in that sense, we could say that. But in politics is not just limited to political parties or those who are in
Right.
office, no. So when we talk about politics, it involves all the people, no, and it involves all the people who either wittingly or unwittingly takes part in decision making. This involves people who are subject to the laws, the policies of the local government units or the national government. And right now, especially with the implementation of the quarantine protocols that is very militaristic nationwide. At first, it
Mm.
was experienced in Metro Manila. Now in Cebu, it's very evident, especially that we're, as Mambambi would have said, the epicenter of the universe, to which certain politicians did not really life. No? But
Yeah.
when you look at this particular phenomena, you will see that dissent is actually growing. No, dissent in the
Mm.
sense that it is not anymore about the rhetorics that were brought by Duterte during the electoral period, such as Bisaya. No, the
Yeah. Yeah.
Bisaya rhetoric that I am a Bisaya, and this won him votes from the entire Mindanao and Visayas region because of that identity politics, no? That I am a
Yes. Yes.
Bisaya, Bisaya na food. And I see many people who were endorsing Duterte in Cebu alone, no? Mga personalities, some of them, are now, saying things, addressing the incompetence, maybe indirectly or directly, challenging the position of the president. And this is something that is way beyond, for me, I would like to go away from the institutional approach of analyzing politics. It's not limited to the people in government. No? So when we talk about
Yeah.
politics, we need to understand the the involvement of the people. And it's not just people are apathetic. They are saying things right now that tend to, zoom in into the reality of the Cebuanos. And it's a good thing that social media and technology it is relatively accessible for some Cebuanos, and you would see real-time updates on abuses, on the implementation of the quarantine protocols. You have questionable implementation of the social amelioration
Right.
programs.
I just
These
wanted,
are
sorry to interrupt you. But since you brought up the people, the how people are becoming a little more critical now. It cannot be denied that in 2016 and 2017, the overwhelming support was not just the politicians, but the people on the ground. You could see the ballers everywhere. Even in the province, you could see that when he was going to the different towns, that people would really show up and support from all sides of the political views, from the middle class to down to the poor. And now, do you think that this pandemic is going to be a turning point for his popularity, especially in the Bisaya areas, or the areas where he really marketed himself as a man of the people, a man who is going to be there for the farmers, for the urban poor, for the marginalized sectors? Do you think that they will still they are still buying into this rhetoric?
in the current but with the current pandemic, it would be very hard for people to swallow their pride and say that this is still the president I voted for during the elections. Why? Because even right after elections, like a year after elections, most of the promises that he delivered in his speeches, electoral speeches, were basically not there, no? Except for the killings of suspected drug criminals, which is basically a question of the rule of law, as mentioned by Attorney King. But the rest that you've mentioned, agrarian reform, ending contractualization, you know, uh, these are things that are substantial or fundamental economic policies that could have been a what do you call this, a turning point in the Philippine economy, perhaps, which could have helped us prepare for a crisis like this, no? So, for
Mm.
instance, uh, we could have had supported our health sector early on. I mean, I appreciate Duterte's speech about I think it was an EO or a Republic Act for the nurses, and that's a good thing because we should do that. Not the government should do that, but it could have been done earlier
Mm.
than this situation. So it took us a pandemic, it took us a health crisis to realize that this is the situation of the Philippines, and it's very hard as an individual, as just a mere citizen, I would say that it's very hard for me, even if I say that I voted for Duterte during the elections. It's very hard for me to deny that this is the reality that I am facing right now, and this is
Mm-mm.
not independent of the decisions of government. No, uh, I believe that this particular situation has an effect on how decisions were made by the national government. From the start of the pandemic, when we heard it in 2019 of November that there is a pandemic, the threat is there, we could have already, called for a team of professionals, healthcare professionals to know about it. By January or February, we had our first case. We could have already implemented policies pertaining to transportation, pertaining to healthcare, pertaining. No, but no, what happened? It was only in April, late April, I think, that we started to do testings. No, with only
Mm.
2,000 test kits from
Yeah.
February, and that's how slow we are, and that's political. That's decision making. That's something that
Mm.
needs to be assessed.
So before we dig down too much into the pandemic, I wanted to go to King for his perspective on human rights under Duterte, and especially here in Cebu. There are some from the pro Duterte side who argue that human rights violations have been happening long before Duterte, and that they're only being highlighted now because this is because of the policies that he speaks about. But from the ground, from your perspective, did you see a noticeable shift in the number of human rights violations committed under the Duterte administration, specifically here in Cebu?
Okay. To answer that question, no, yes, there's a significant shift, no, especially when we talk about the war on drugs. In Cebu, we've seen that there are a lot of people who were victims, no, of the extra legal killings under
Mm-mm.
the war on drugs. And aside from that, we have also seen the way the government deals with dissenters, no, in Cebu. Although there's really a complex relationship between law enforcement and those critical groups, no, throughout the years, but we have seen lately, especially this year, no, that the government is really committed, no, to curb all forms of dissent, and that's what
Mm.
happened with Cebu 8. No,
Mm-mm.
before I used to be a student activist in the University of the Philippines, Cebu. No, and we used to conduct or conduct rallies or protest actions in the same area where the Cebu 8 were arrested. No, it
Yeah.
never
For
happened
those
to
who
me
don't know,
that
the
I
Cebu Eight. Sorry. For those who don't know, the Cebu Eight were protesters who were arrested during the anti-terror bill protest in June in front of the University of Cebu. So we rapidly reported on this. There were videos of the police going onto the UP campus and arresting and dispersing violently the protesters. Okay, sorry. Just needed to add that for context. Go
yeah.
ahead.
Thank you for providing the context, Ryan. No? So in that particular situation, no, we've seen that police officers, especially, are really committed, no, to curb forms of dissent like free speech and freedom of assembly. And at the same time, we actually see that more Cebuanos have a growing consciousness, no, on what is
Mm.
happening on the ground. Uh, the same example, no, Cebu 8 is really a good topic to discuss the human rights perspective because there was an overwhelming support, no, coming from the masses, from the public when they were arrested, no, as manifested sa amount that they got for their bail. And I believe that people now here in Cebu are more vigilant, no, on what's happening on the ground. And as what I mentioned earlier, one of the issues that we're confronting now is the uh, the the enforced disappearance, no, of
Okay.
Elena Tijamo.
Can you give us a little bit of background of Elena Tijamo?
Um, I think she was abducted, no, around June, no, last month, and until now, we don't hear any reports, no, as to her whereabouts, and we continue to call, no, for accountability, especially that PARDEC, the organization where she belongs, believes that the law enforcement agencies or the military have something to do with her sudden disappearance.
Okay. So I wanted to get Hannah's thoughts on the same topic, especially coming from the college students. I want to know a little bit about the challenges that students face under this administration.
Or katong around pa nga campaign niya, daghan jud ang suporta ni Duterte. No,
Mm.
kay he was known to be a tatay to the youth. Mo jud na ang iyang image nga iyang gipadala sa youth, no, tatay. Tatay Digong,
Yes.
wala iyang gihatag nga image namo. Especially the way how he presents himself. So we saw him as a fatherly figure because isog iyang identity, which is a father. Pero he changed. During ni lingkod na siya, all we saw was blood. So, would a father kill his children? Would a father let his children starve? Or would a father bomb their homes? As he is on his 4 years in the office, as a youth, wala mi ka-feel sa iyang fatherly love. Instead, siya pa ang naka-divide pa sa katawhan. So, as a college student o usa ka student activist, alarming kaayo. Kay especially gahapon sa Cebu Police Provincial Office nga nagradtag na sad sila on student activist, in this case sa Kabataan Party List. Og sa naitabo pag Cebu 8 during pag-aresto sa Cebu 8, increasing sad kaayo ang red tagging before, during ug after sa aresto. So kami as student activists nga nagpasa or naglaban lamang sa demokratikong katungod sa katawhan, labaw na sa youth, alarming kay they saw us as criminals. Like they saw us as in this case labaw na ang ATL, ang anti-terror law, they saw us as terrorists. So, and in my side lang, like especially we are ingani ang among gipaglaban, pero kami mismo nahadlok na misa for ourselves. In his regime, instead of empowering youth, iyang gihatag ka namo is fear. Hadlok na mi nga mo express among dissent because of his of the way he silenced people, especially us. So especially sad nga karon nga inig sa among eskwelahan, especially sa among sa University of San Carlos, which is na-shock me kay musulod na ang mga military sa mga eskwelahan. Kay they say nga kanang it was for NSTP, and they say nga it's for a business seminar or something like that. But inig ka abot na namo sa event mismo, ang mahitabo is ang military mag-conduct og kanang mga seminars about red tagging. So they will be talking about anak bayan, they will be talking about various progressive groups there, and telling students not to join them because they're criminals, they're NPAs and such that. So sa eskwelahan lang mismo nahadlok na mi kay sudlon naman mi sa militaries. So wala na mi safe haven sa tibuok Pilipinas because of his regime. Mauna siya ang nakuha na mo.
I wanted to ask if you could possibly give us insights on. We know that the state of press freedom in the Philippines is getting more difficult for reporters and journalists. How about campus journalism? How has it been more difficult for campus journalists to cover issues on their campuses? And can you give us a little bit of perspective on that end?
Kana siya nindot to siya nga question, no? Kay especially sa case sa University of San Carlos nga ang today's Carolinian, which is the student publication of the USC, wala na sila gitagaan og budget and they're threatened to be closed by the administration because of their critical publication. So
Okay.
makita na to nga kung unsa ang nahitabo sa mga universities, nahitabo sad sa nasod or sa outside because university is just a microcosm of our nation. So
Yeah.
the fact lang nga pahilumon ang university publication because of their critical publications against the university admins. Unsa na lang kaha the way sila musturya outside sa mga issues gawas sa eskwelahan. Para sa to makita sad sa kuan no sa today's Carolinian no kay today's Carolinian man jud akong pwede mabasahan just kuan basta mo touch lang sila og mga issues outside sa university daghan na kaayo ang mo reklamo, daghan na kaayo ang mustorya nga why are they touching things outside the school, why are they touching such things like that. So naglisod na gali
Do you
sila
see
og
this as a
public
similar trend across different campuses?
sa
Sorry,
akong nakuha
do you see? I just asked. Do you see this as similar happening in
actually,
other campuses here in Cebu?
Actually yes, kay especially sad sa kanang sa tug-ani nga kanang pirbida sila i-kuan og hate sa ilang critical publications and because of that mahadlok na noon ang mga various universities publication nga mahimong critical because mahadlok na sila kuan og budget, hadlok na sila kuan og hadlok na sila pasidad-an silang university admins kay parehas lang no kanang example lang nato ang suga sa university CNU, Cebu Normal University nga kailangan pa i-pressure sa mga estudyante ang publication para lang sila maka-release og critical publications kay mahadlok sila sa unsa ang mahitabo sa kung unsa ang masturya sa ilahang admins sa publication. So makita dayon ang intimidation og kahadlok sa university publications sa ilang admins to be critical. So mao na siya ang murag nakakuyaw karon nga murag trend among sa student publication.
And I wanted to go to King Perez. You wanted to add something to this?
Yes, because I think there was already a discussion on the anti-terrorism law.
Yes.
As to Cebu, no, at the local level, I believe if the culture of impunity would continue, we would see more human rights violations, no, at the local level. For one, as to the current administration in answering the different human rights violations that were committed, no, during the in this present regime, and we've seen that they always disregarded, no, third-party investigation, both local and international, as to the state of human rights here in the Philippines, and we've already observed that when the president sets the tone, no, on what to do, on what to implement, local leaders, no, would always follow suit. So, for example, we have seen in the past days that more LGU officials have become onion skinned, no, when dealing with criticisms. For one, in Cebu, we've known Maria Victoria Beltran, no, for facing some charges, no, by posting one sarcastic photos of police force, no, as what we've seen at in the Cebu 8. So in relation to the anti-terrorism law, which is quite surprising, no, Duterte did not really dwell on this topic during his SONA. this kind of situation would be dangerous, no, for human rights defenders, critics, journalists. When the ATL is implemented, especially that we're questioning the broad definition of terrorism and other okay. So what I was saying is that this kind of situation that we're facing, the culture of impunity, and the president continuing to set the tone on becoming more authoritarian and draconian when it comes to its policies, no, it would be very dangerous, no, for human rights defenders, critics, journalists at the local level in expressing and exercising their fundamental rights.
Okay, thank you, King. So I wanted to go to Attorney Lisa now. If you could, so my question is, if you could rate Duterte from a 1 to 10, 10 being the best on how he's managed the the environment so far in the Philippines, and it can be Cebu also. How would you grade him?
Um, well, as a professor, I think I would grade him as 5.0, not 1 to 10, but yeah.
Okay,
So a failing grade. Yeah.
and why?
So why is it? There's so many issues and problems in regard to the environment
Mm,
right now. At the moment, we're even flooded with complaints, people asking for assistance in terms of environmental issues around Cebu and around the Philippines. So primarily, I'd like to raise the issue of fisheries. The fisheries issues. We've been battling this issue for a long
mm,
time. I've been in this work for more than 20 years, and and we've seen how worse it had gotten during the COVID-19 pandemic. The impunity in
mm,
the seas, because the illegal commercial fishings were really rampant. Still ongoing. Are still rampant in and around Cebu, and even in our within our Philippine territory. We have the West Philippine
mm,
Sea issues, and we see that the destruction of our marine resources being done by foreign fishing vessels coming from our friendly China. But on the other hand, I'd also like to raise the issue of mining. At the start of the Duterte administration, with Gina Lopez around, she was able to stop the operation of 29 mining companies all over the countries because of alleged
mm,
violations. But now we hear that the president is going to reopen 5 up to 8 mining companies, mostly in Mindanao
mm,
and in Luzon. And we know that this are really causing havoc to the communities, and especially indigenous peoples communities, and also the environment. Of course, the destruction being done is really irreversible
mm,
when it comes to mining, and so that's really one of the greatest challenges that we will have in the coming days, because apparently the administration is saying that they will reopen these mining companies because we need the investments. We need to jumpstart our economy. So it's still the paradigm of economic development, and ignoring the environment. How to protect the environment at the same time, which we really need, because these are areas where we could build resilience from the different issues that we're facing. So another issue that we're really facing is actually the the pollution, the water issues,
mm,
specifically here in Cebu. So there's no clear roadmap for this environmental issues or environmental concerns that we have from the government, and the local government units who are primarily, given the task to protect the environment, are also the ones actually sometimes leading the charge against the environmental protection
mm,
measures that we are putting in. So it's really a big challenge, because there's a culture of impunity. There's a culture of not really caring about protecting the environment, because they don't feel the impacts now. They don't feel that it's a huge emergency right now. But we see that climate change is going to be a great deal of problem. It will create a great deal of problem for us, especially in the future. And problems like marine plastic pollution, marine debris is increasing because of COVID-19. The increased
Mm.
usage of single-use plastics being thrown and not being managed at all, and our government's propensity for looking for quick fix solutions, like for example, waste to energy facilities that would just burn the waste, and
Mm.
but this is actually against our Clean Air Act, the laws that we have in place, which bans incineration. So, but then our
Mm.
government is trying to reverse it, creating policies that will allow this. So it's we're regressing when it comes to the environment. So many gains that we've
Yes.
had for a long time, we're actually regressing.
Okay.
It's too sad to talk about.
Mm-mm. You mentioned a little bit earlier about how the pandemic and the environment are actually very intertwined and are very
Hmm.
intersectional. And I think
Yeah.
that's a takeaway that everyone around the world has realized when we've seen,
Hmm.
the air pollution clear up when everyone started to stay at home. But then we see an increase in pollution of single-use, plastics and sachets. Can you go a little bit into more detail about the environment and how it is intertwined with this COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah. Now, so one of the reasons that is being advanced right now as to why this pandemic happened or is going to happen more in the future is because of our lack of care for the environment. Meaning to say, the COVID-19 pandemic started with the animal to human transmission of a disease,
Mm.
which was supposed to be just to be transmitted amongst animals. So they call it zoonosis. Diba? Zoonosis is when there's a transfer of diseases from the animals to the humans. And the reason why there's a transfer of these diseases from the humans to animals is because we have encroached on their habitats, on the protected
Mm.
areas where they're supposed to just stay and just supposed to thrive, and not and not be destroyed, or in not to be disturbed, in other words. So the so
Mm.
since we have disturbed their habitat, since we have encroached on these protected areas, we have not protected our forests. We have soiled our air, because as they say, the more um, bad the air quality is, the more we are susceptible also to the COVID-19 disease, because it has to do with the clean air that we breathe in that will create us have more resilience to this
Mm.
disease. So because of that, we have failed, because we have failed to take care of this environment. The protected areas are really very important. They're protected, they're set aside not to be touched by humans. It's because so that these are the habitats of these animals, but then we go to them, we develop them, we bulldoze them so that we can turn them into subdivisions, we can turn them into shopping malls. We reclaim
Mm.
areas because we want more land area, so we reclaim, we cover our coastal habitats, and so we lose also the habitats of these animals, and we might also lose the cure for these diseases, the natural cures
Mm.
that may have been still, but that is still not yet discovered. So this is really the essence of why we're really very strong on we're pushing for environmental protection. It's not for just the trees and the birds and the bees, diba? We're not being tree huggers here without making
Yeah.
sense. We're doing it because we care for the future. We care for our health, because
Mm.
our environment and our health is closely linked together. Because if you look at environment, medyo kwan siya ba? Medyo abstract siya sa mga tao. But when you talk
Mm.
about environment, and I will always tell it to my students, it's about the land, air, and the water that we need, di ba? When you could talk
Mm.
about environment. So it may be defined in abstract, but then essentially mo na siya. Land where we get our food, air that we breathe in, and water that we drink. So it's
Mm,
law actually also if you talk about it. So when we don't take care of this, we also lose our lives.
mm.
It's really the essence of environment. It's our life. So mo na ang ato ang dapat i-remember. I hope pasabtan ni sa mga tao.
Mm. For us here in Cebu, what do you think are the top three environmental issues that the people should really be watching?
Yeah, so one, water,
Okay.
because water is historically a huge problem in Cebu right now, and we have saltwater intrusion as far as Talamban, I think, and so our groundwater is fast depleting, and it cannot really cope up with the demands of our population. So we need to restore them. And to restore them, we need the watersheds. The watersheds are in the Central Cebu protected landscape. So we need to protect these watersheds because this will recharge our groundwater. This will
Mm,
create more water source. So that's two interlinked issues that we need to protect. Then last is because we are an island. We're surrounded by water. 50% of our animal protein comes from fish. We need to
mm,
protect our fisheries, our resources, marine resources, because we need food. We need to feed our population. We need to feed the local communities who are directly dependent on this. So we need to protect them as well. So for me, that's the three most important issues or sectors of the environment that we need to protect. But finally, if I can add one more, it's
okay.
clean air.
Okay.
It's clean air. We need clean air. Yeah. I think we've been trying to push for the monitoring of our air quality here, especially here in Cebu City in the urban areas, because we are surrounded by coal-fired power plants, cement factories. So if you notice, our quality of the air is really not that good here in Cebu City. So um, we need to be more vigilant about it. We need to push the government to monitor the quality of our air, and and so that we will protect ourselves. We will become more healthy. And I think that's it.
Okay. So we've touched on a lot today. And so we're running out of time. So I just like to wrap up. So we're heading into the administration's fifth year now, and then another year before the election. So to wrap up, can you share how do you feel about the future right now? I know that's a difficult question in the context of what we're all going through. But how do you feel about where we're moving in the next year, in the next 2 years of this administration, and what do you hope will change? So let's start again with Attorney Lisa, and then we'll.
Hmm. So what was that again? What?
So how
Sorry.
do you feel? How do you feel about the future, where we're moving, where we're headed right now as a country, and moving into Duterte's fifth year as president, and then we have an election the next year. So, just
Yeah.
your thoughts on the future.
Um, I'm hoping that for the future of the Philippines, that we will hold on until the 2022. There are so many issues. There are so many challenges or even attacks to our human rights. The ATL is really the anti-terror law is really one big challenge that we need to face moving forward as advocates, as activists, and we have to continue on criticizing the government. We have to continue putting them on their toes, because otherwise they will just just do at whatever they want to do, and we don't want that kind of society. We want a more we want more democratic spaces. We want more recognition of human rights, basic human rights, including the right to a healthy environment. That's it.
Okay, Attorney King.
Okay. For the next 2 years, no, we still urge the government, no, to uphold human rights. And although what's happening now is quite contrary to the claims of President Duterte, no, during his SONA, that he would really uphold such rights. And at the same time, I think it is already evident, no, that people are becoming more conscious, more participative, no, in the discussions that affect the state of affairs of our nation. And I believe that such a trend or shift will continue, no, as long as the president sits.
Okay, thank you so much. And si Nino.
For me, I think it is still very, very uncertain, given the situation we are facing right now in the middle of pandemic, and of course the trend in politics and governance that we have witnessed for 4 years already, and the remaining 2 years would still be very uncertain and perhaps very scary. But I think this is when, in the scary parts of history, in the most challenging parts of history, it is when the greatest of us emerge. No? Greatest artists, greatest academics, the great people in history always emerge during times of crisis. And given these 2 years, I believe, as mentioned by Attorney King earlier, that dissent is really growing. Although now it is limited because of the pandemic, perhaps limited in the platforms that we can utilize to express, but it is in fact growing, and discontent is there. Uh, I am hoping that we will not leave it within the institutional frames, which means let's not leave this
Mm.
uncertain times to government alone. It means that we have to take the challenge. If the challenge is government itself, then we must face the government itself. If the government needs help, and by help it includes criticizing, it includes proper reassessment and reevaluation of policies, then we must take part in that. And for the next 2 years, we must make sure that all steps that we are going to take will be for each and every
Okay, thank
Filipino's
you so much, Nino.
benefits.
And Hannah? Okay, I think we lost Hannah there.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess we'll just wrap up. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We were with Hannah Cartagena from Youth Against Tyranny, and Nino Olivar, University of San Carlos, Political Science Faculty at King Anthony Perez from National Union of People's Lawyers, Cebu Chapter, and Attorney Liza from the University of Cebu College of Law and Philippine Earth Justice
EGC.
Center, Cebu. Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been Rappler Talk, and good evening.